Hello, and welcome to the first B-side of 2018. My name is David from 7poundbag.com. Thank you for dropping by. If you're a first-time visitor, please make sure you subscribe to us. I'm going to try to do these a little more regular this year. Again, the A-side is more of the topical type thing, more of the week-to-week type stuff that I'll drop every now and again. The B-side is more permanent type stuff, where I'll talk comic books, historical stuff, larger sports questions, things like that. So I'll try to have these out for us every Saturday or so, just to kind of give us some extra stuff and more digestible type things. Again, I hope you do enjoy the show. Any comments or any other topics you may think of, by all means, drop it below. And by all means, please hit the website. We've got a ton of content there, pretty much almost daily. Today I'm going to be going over Alpha Flight. Those of you that follow me on Quora, thank you for dropping over. I do tend to talk about two topics. One would be Quasar, one would be Alpha Flight quite a bit. Alpha Flight is one that I do think that we should I think would deserves its own Netflix show or even on ABC, depending on how they write it. I do think I tell you the truth, I do think it actually could be the next show that they do, and I think it would be successful. But I do kind of want to break it down as far as how I would do the show and kind of come around and give people basically a primer because unless you're of a certain age or you happen to read all comic books, you kind of miss the John Byrne version of Alpha Flight, which I'll go over a bit. So I do hope you sit back, relax. Any comments by all means, let me know. And let's get into Alpha Flight. There are two characters. First off, you do have to get in with the big question is which version of Vindicator slash Guardian do you go with? Because you basically have a husband that starts it and it ends up becoming the woman later on. Due to circumstances in the comic book, which one do you go with? I'm going to pass that down the block a little bit. I'm going to come back to it because I do think you need a male slash female dynamic going on as far as like a balance. And there's another character that can also go male female because it was also played by a a male that became a female later on. So I'm going to come back to that and decide which one I want with that later. But my first character that I do want to talk about is going to be, in my opinion, the biggest question mark on the show as far as what do we go with, and that is of course going to be Aurora. Her and her twin brother Northstar, they both have similar powers, superhuman stamina, endurance. They're able to fly. They're able to shoot basically laser beams out of their hands or light beams out of their hands. When they join together, they give off a huge amount of energy. It's they have some other powers that kind of come on a little bit later. Aurora kind of gets her DNA messed with a little bit, which changes her powers somewhat. Aurora, in my opinion, she is probably one of the more fascinating characters on the show as she evolves. She is afflicted with multiple personality disorder. Depending on how they want to do that, they can either start that at the beginning of the show or they can continue going, or that can basically be like a season 2 arc, so to speak. She starts out, she has two main ones. You've got basically the sex pot, Aurora, and you have the quiet little school teacher who's basically scared of everything, very conservative, very, buttoned up, dressed down, other type stuff. And again, like I said, you've got the other personality, which basically will sleep with anyone and anything. Does kind of make it a fun little dynamic here. I don't know if you want to do that from season 1 beginning, just because you've got to establish everybody else. But I do feel that Aurora is, if you have a quality actress that can pull it off, I think that's a great thing to do. Again, I'm not going to get into casting by means, throw that at the bottom if you'd like. But she has I think season 1, you basically start out with Aurora, with her brother, as the basically middle of the road type personality, maybe a little bit on the sex kitten side. And then you could have something happen toward the end of the season where her second personality emerges. Once you have the rest of the characters established, I think you kind of get into that, flip it around a bit. But I do think that can be your jumping off point as far as how to deal with her character. Again, her brother, like I mentioned, has the same power set. He grew up kind of privileged. He's a bit of a snob. He's a bit of a prick, to use the term. And also from Montreal, just to throw that out there as far as where they're at in Canada. I'll come back to that in a second. I probably should have mentioned that. He's a little bit stronger than Aurora. She's a little bit faster than he is. He basically ends up being, he's a championship skier, Olympic type level before his powers develop. Both of these twins are mutants. Of course, you can't really do a whole lot with mutants in Marvel Universe till the whole Fox thing's ironed out. But you can basically make them Terrigenesis if you like, because apparently that's the way Marvel's doing it as far as TV is concerned. He does come out later on as gay. Again, that's another arc you could throw out there, which does kind of, with this being on an ABC, again, does kind of help the PC environment that Marvel's embroiled in. And like I said, I think those are your two of your four core characters that I think you're going to throw out there. Kind of round back to what Alpha Flight actually is. It's basically Canada's version of Avengers. It's kind of the light brushing to look at it, but not really. Uh, Canada starts the Weapon X program, which those of you that are familiar with Wolverine, that's how they started. And basically, Alpha Flight was Canada, instead of having superheroes go out and do their own thing, like Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, etc., they basically nationalized them, kind of like their healthcare, and they started training program. And you have, it's under James Hudson, who was a Weapon X, depending on which timeline we're looking at, because Lord knows they retconned and rewrote it to smithereens. But when it basically first started, you had Alpha Flight, which is basically their top tier superheroes. Then you had Beta and Gamma Flight as training programs to get up to it. James Hudson is in charge of it. Later on, his wife becomes in charge of it, and they're basically under governmental control. As time goes on, not so much. So that's basically your basic stories of Alpha Flight. Part of the reason why I do think this would work is because, for those of you that watch Logan, Canada is this wonderful, magical country that does everything right that America does wrong. And again, that kind of fits with the whole Disney princess type situation that we're going along here. But yeah, like I said, that's kind of where I'm thinking with Alpha Flight. We go with the original type setup. Our third character that I do want to talk about is Marina. She's probably one of the first ones to get called up to Alpha Flight. She's an alien, depending on how you want to do that or not. It's kind of up to y'all. I would make her an alien because I do think that's a great Season 2 story arc, again, or even possibly a Season 1 story arc. Basically, you have this alien race called the Plodex, and what they do is they drop eggs on developing planets. The eggs hatch, they eventually take over. That's basically how they seed the universe to come over. She basically starts out as this young woman who's able to breathe underwater. She's superhumanly strong. She's able to breathe in water and out of water. She has limited flight. She has super sharp talons. She's basically like a Submariner type person or Aquaman type character. Just, of course, she's got the talons. She can also, temperature doesn't bother her. She can get basically into ice and it doesn't affect her. She has larger eyes, as you can tell here. She's an alien. Hello, guess what? As the story goes along, her alien DNA kind of starts to take more and more over, and she eventually morphs into a gigantic sea creature that Namor, who is her husband, ends up having to kill. Again, you can bring Namor into that if you'd like, or you could have somebody else have to do it. But I do like Marina because she's a little scared, so to speak, to begin with. She's not really sure who she is, where she came from. She's kind of a friend to everybody. During battle, at times, she almost snaps, and that's when the talons come out, and she starts ripping people to shreds. Again, you have this dualness of the meek friend to this animal type situation. Again, John Byrne really likes this situation. Again, as we saw with Aurora, hers is mentally, Marina's kind of physical. But I like the Marina character. I think she's a good basis. Again, you could have her come from the Northwest Territories. That's kind of like your section area there. But like I said, I like her. Then next I'm going to go into Sasquatch, which is Walter Langowski. He's a scientist, British Columbia, for those of you following along on the map. Basically, he is our shapeshifter. He basically comes over as almost like a Bruce Banner clone, which is basically how he got his powers. Instead of becoming a big green-skinned monster that just basically attacks everything whenever he gets angry, it's developed later on that he basically becomes a great beast, which is a kind of a religious type aspect. They become like animal gods and things like that. But for this story, we could just make him become, Sasquatch, a big, huge lady like monster. Again, you have superhuman strength, you have size, you have durability, all the other good stuff. Walter Langowski, of course, is a genetic scientist in his own right, one of the best ones on the planet. He's never really mentioned whenever everybody gets together because, again, Alpha Flight's kind of shoved in the back burner once John Byrne's not around to push him in there. But again, he ends up falling in love with Aurora. Aurora starts giving him problems. We move on from there. But like I said, that is basically your foursome that I think you pretty much have to have, because you've got your two flyers, you've got your sex kitten, you've got your, you got her brother who's a bit of a prick, can always be an antagonist, almost kind of like Quicksilver's used somewhat. You have your man mountain Sasquatch type person, and you've got your outcast, so to speak. I think those are the four that you end up having, which brings me to our two characters that could go either way. Again, I've got two female, two male. Here's our two that you can go with. The first one I want to talk about is Shaman. The original is from Calgary. He's a doctor. He starts to learn sorcery, kind of have a Doctor Strange type bind here. I don't think you go with the whole Sorcerer Supreme type thing. I think you make him a much lower level sorcerer, because obviously you don't want to bring in the whole Doctor Strange and he could do every time type thing. I think you make him a much minor level where there's certain things he can do. One thing I do love about Shaman is he's got this bag, which basically has a pocket dimension inside of it that they call the Void, where you can basically reach into it, think of what he wants, and pull it out. I don't even know if you really need the magic as long as you've got this magic bag with it. I think you could use a much younger character where he basically uses that to bring tools out and to put international beings and villains and all that. He puts them in the bag until he's able to store them somewhere else. His daughter basically takes over the powers and his role. You could do the same thing there. She could be a gymnast or whatever. She could also be a doctor. You could make her, like she is in the story, a much younger person, or you could just have her as a regular female. As far as age is concerned, it's completely up to you which way you want to go. They both have a similar power set. The daughter's actually much stronger magically. The male is he's much more intelligent. She's smarter as far as sorcery. He's smarter as far as everything else. Again, he's a doctor and all that because, again, Canada. But like I said, it depends on which way you want to go with it, which way you want to write it. Me personally, I would probably go with the male version, but that's just me. Here's our issue when we come to Guardian. Again, you have James Hudson makes a super suit, basically Canada's version of Iron Man and Captain America together. He's able to fly. He can fire energy blast. He can generate a force field. He's got this real fun power that they never really use because, unfortunately, it doesn't really help in a team environment. But basically, whenever he's flying, he can geolock himself, which basically he stays where he's at as the Earth rotates underneath him. So in the blink of an eye, he's hundreds of miles away. Again, that's amazing for a regular hero. In a team environment, doesn't really help because all of a sudden you look around, your leader's, is now in British Columbia where everybody else is in Ontario. That doesn't really help. But it's an amazing type power. Just to kind of throw that out there, if they ever wanted to do it, I don't know if that really works that well. But it's kind of a skin-tight suit. Again, the husband ends up, before they retcon and rewrite and redo this and read that the other, which unfortunately they do so much since I stopped reading, and kind of the reason why I stopped reading the comics. But for all practical purposes, he dies. We could just say his wife ends up taking over the suit. She is much better using the suit than he is, and she kind of gives a really interesting vibe because, in my opinion, she's a much better leader of people than her husband was. Her husband basically led kind of like Iron Man does. I'm the most powerful of us. I know what to do. I know what's right. Do this. As time goes on, Vindicator, which is what she called herself for a good long while, and the kind of what I think of whenever I think of her in the suit, she is much more of a personality vision. She's not as strong as some of the others. As their powers develop, or as the writers develop their powers, she's not nearly as powerful as everybody else. Again, a lot of the stuff she can do, Aurora and Northstar can do, with the added benefit that they're faster and stronger than she is. So she becomes much more of a background leader of personnel type situation. Of course, her being a redhead, you're going to get a lot of Janeway comparisons. But in my opinion, she's much better with the interpersonal experiences than Janeway ever was. Janeway is more of a take charge type person. Vindicator would do it as necessary. But again, I think I would go with if I had my druthers, I would go with the male shaman and the female vindicator. Just because if you've got a better writing staff and you can avoid the Janeway comparisons, I think you could do a lot more with the vindicator situation. You may even have both of them doing it, both of them on the show, and then have Guardian die season one in some cataclysmic thing, maybe even involving Marina or whoever. And that's what ends up giving Aurora her split personality and Heather Hudson having to take over in season two. So that's your base six, basically. Like I said, I think you've got a good mix. You could even do 4 and 2, where you have, like I said, you have 4 males, 2 females. Till season one, then you have 3 males and 3 females. Extra things you can throw about, because I do know those of you that read Alpha Flight in the comic books, you want to know about Puck. Puck is kind of hard to cast. It would be kind of hard to do. He's basically a dwarf with just unreal agility. I do kind of wonder about the whole dwarf thing with Game of Thrones coming about. He's again got enhanced strength, which pretty much all these people do, which again, he's kind of a replicant as his Vindicator. He's very smart. He is basically a soldier of fortune who ends up having to take over this curse, which shrunk him in half, which, to tell you the truth, is never really touched on for a good long bit of the series. It's a long burning storyline, which is one of the better things about Alpha Flight. Since they were in Canada, John Byrne and his followers basically didn't involve them with all the other giant crossovers and all this other mess. They were kind of a niche series, which was basically allowed to develop on their own, which was nice. And like I said, Puck's curse kind of developed forever before you ever got a good resolution of it. I mean, if you look up the issues that you've got to read to involve Puck, it's like 2 or 3 here, and then 20 issues later, 2 or 3 here, and then 2 or 3 years later, you get another one. You just never had to deal. They just never really bought Puck up, even though he was the heart and soul of the team, so to speak, to a large extent. Especially whenever he got into the love thing with Vindicator, you never really had to. If it was one of those things where they would explain a bit and then go away. It's kind of a lot of similar to the way they did Wolverine. They would give you snippets, they would give you little bits of information, but they never would go in and tell the whole story until, unfortunately, they had to. And it was kind of fun whenever you had like the handbook to the Marvel Universe and all that. Then you could actually read everything that you've missed, and you're like, oh, they still ain't told us what all this thing was about. But it was a fun little situation. But I don't think I do Puck, just because I think it would be a little difficult to cast. I think it would be a little difficult to show with all these otherly powerly type person. I mean, basically you have, unless you started doing things like Colossus and Wolverine did with X-Men in the comics, you started doing that with Puck and Sasquatch, where basically he would pick Puck up and throw him into things. Puck not having the skeleton or the claws that Wolverine does, that doesn't really work that well. Again, Puck would have several fights later on, especially in the mid-60s as far as the issues are concerned, where he basically felt that he wasn't useful anymore. And I think in a TV show environment, you're not going to have 5 seasons where he becomes less and less important. You don't have a time for slow burn storylines. So in that case, for my 7th, I go with Diamond Lil. She is also a mutant. You saw her in one of the X-Men movies as a child. Basically, she was there with Cyclops. She has an ability to basically turn herself into diamonds. She makes an impenetrable field all around herself that nothing can get through. Unfortunately, she's immobile at that point, but she cannot be hurt at all. She basically, you have situations where Sasquatch could pick her up like she's a statue and swing her like a baseball bat, which is always a lot of fun. Like I said, I think you could do a lot with her. She could be a missile weapon. She could just be used as protection. She's not like Invisible Woman where she can project this field. She just basically turns herself into it. And then whenever she turns herself back into human, because she can still see and feel everything going on around her, it just doesn't hurt her. She turns back into human form, so she can basically instantly change back and forth. Again, she starts out as a criminal. She starts out infiltrating Alpha Flight. Again, you could do that later on if you'd like. but she becomes a romantic interest for a few people. Again, like I said, I think her character's a lot of fun. I would take her over Puck as my quote unquote seventh member if we had to go that far. You could also pat her on down the line and use her as a substitute for Marina if you go with, if she ends up being the big baddie of season one. But that is my core seven that I would go with. Again, it's up to you which one you go with the shaman. I would go with the male. You could even have him die or have him have to go into the void. He's the one that pulls Marina in, which dictates her daughter having to take over. And then you would end up with four females and two males, or you could even do it reversal. You start out with the female shaman. She ends up pulling Marina in because that is her friend into the void to save humanity, and then you have the male come out. It could be her son. So, I mean, yeah, you could twist the genders, you could twist the ages how you would. I'm just looking at basically the power sets. Like I said, I do think the way Disney feels about Canada right now, I think that would be a good thing to do. You could also avoid the entire political carnage that is the American citizens. You could film it up there, which makes it a little bit cheaper. Uh, you have a lot of ongoing storylines, which I think would work wonders as time goes on. Again, you have the whole Great Beast storyline if you want to do that with Sasquatch. You have the Great Beasts, the Marina thing with her entire Plodex storyline. You've got what exactly is the Void. Again, you could always use Puck as a almost like a Jarvis type situation. He could stay in the back at the Alpha Flight complex. You've got the whole Canadian government. Those of us in the U.S., we don't really know how the Canadian government works, but eventually, of course, because it's Marvel, the government starts to become evil and do things that Alpha Flight doesn't really like, so they end up breaking away. Again, you could break in X-23 if you wanted to do that, while they're not as a Wolverine stand-in, because obviously you're not exactly going to bring Hugh Jackman into a Netflix series without completely blowing apart your budget, but you can still do X-23. It's not like the actress has done anything much. You've got the whole Vindicator Guardian type dynamic that you got going on. But again, that's basically my pitch for Alpha Flight if it was going to be a TV show. Again, I would not do it as a movie series just because I think you would have way too much to do and you can't really do an Avengers type setup with it. The hardest casting I think you're going to have is who do you have as Heather Hudson as Vindicator, and of course Aurora. I think you have to have her front and center, not only for the obvious sex appeal reasons, but also because as her personality goes, if you do the personality conflict, you've got to have somebody that can sell it. I really do. I mean, Walter Langowski is Sasquatch. Half his time he's going to be CGI or a larger guy anyway. Doesn't really matter. Northstar, you basically just need somebody that's just ultra handsome. Again, doesn't really matter. You could just throw pretty much, there's thousands of guys in Hollywood that can fit that role. Shaman's going to be a bit difficult because, again, he is Native American, but I do think that does bring in opportunity for some diversity that's not forced. Again, these are all characters that have been around for a long time that you don't have to shoehorn diversity into it. They're all over Canada. They're all from different parts of Canada. There's not a ton of mutants in Canada like there is in the U.S. or in other areas. But it's all naturally. I mean, yeah, you're in Calgary. Of course we've got an Indian there. It's out in British Columbia. Yeah, of course we got the basic white guy there. Yeah, we've got twins that have differently looking ears, but, they're rich. They're kind of little on the inbred side. That's kind of hinted at one point. They're kind of an insular type community. Yeah, that's perfectly natural. Yeah, we've got, your basic upper crust type person there. You don't really have to shoehorn anything into it. Diamond Lil, if you want, you can make her of a different race if you like, because obviously there are minorities up there, completely up to you. Puck, again, could be a Buffalo Soldier if you wanted to do his actual Soldier for Fortune type stuff. You can make him a Buffalo Soldier from the 1860s from Western Canada if you want to do that, completely up to you. I mean, but what I'm saying here is you don't have to force diversity into it. You don't have to shove it down our throats. It can come about naturally with, pretty much the only exception being if you wanted to make an Asian or an African American character. And it wouldn't be that hard because it's not like you really know it that well. You're your gender divisions are pretty much done pretty easily because it's a very forward-looking series. But again, that's my Alpha Flight. I won't hold you too much longer here. I would love to get your feedback as far as what you think, as far as what your feelings are. Do you like the Thoughts for Puck versus Diamond Lil? Again, if there's other members that you'd like. If this is successful, I would love to get Goblin in a little bit later on. And as far as the later members of Gamma Flight, I don't think Box would work very well just because you're going to get a whole bunch of Iron Man type issues, and if you went with Richard Box, you're opening up a whole nother window. And I don't think really that you have the kind of time in a TV show where you could do that. Again, that's like a 3 episode arc if you're going to do Richard Box, in my opinion. I mean, that's a good 20 hours of TV. Just because I don't think it's something you could do very well. Madison Jeffries, like I said, he's probably one of my favorite characters in later Alpha Flight. I don't know if you could do. I think that blows your CG budget. Again, the characters that I'm looking at, Flight's not that hard to do as far as CG. The whole Sasquatch thing's not really that hard to do. Today's environment, the rest of them outside of the laser blast, they're not expensive powers. Diamond Lil's not expensive. Puck, I think it would get expensive with the agility, things like that, which is why like I said, I would kind of use him more as a mentor type role. And again, like I said, you've got 3 characters that fly. You've got 5 that have super strength. I kind of think you need to back that up a little bit. I could even see if you just wanted to go 6 and 6, completely dropping the Shaman character until later on. And again, Marina, you could just have somebody in a good costume as long as they do better than they did with Triton and Inhumans. Please see my video for that if you'd like. And while you're at it, please like and subscribe to the channel. By all means, hit the website, 7poundbag.com. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I do intend on getting back to Fantastic Four, but I will see you next Saturday. Have a great life, and as always, Puck Kobe.